Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, we have our usual roundup of the main stories affecting the Sikh community around the world. And in Geneva, as the 60th annual UN Human Rights Commission session draws to a close, we take a look at the Sikh community's contribution. And interestingly, the shocking admission from a former British diplomat at the Commission that the British government cares more about friendly relations with India than it does about British Sikhs. And we have Keir Starmer's answer to the question if he raised the subject of Jaggi with Narendra Modi this time during his visit. Well, stay tuned to find out what he said. All this and more on today's show. But joining me, as always, is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and life is good in Canada because the NHL hockey season has begun. And exciting news in Vancouver. Everybody knows Ashdeep Baines is a member of the Vancouver Canucks. He was last year sent down to the junior team where he was instrumental in them winning the cup last year. So now he's back up at the Vancouver Canucks NHL level, and he's already making a difference in his first two games, Angus. Exciting stuff here in Vancouver. Almost exciting as the comments that our viewers share with us. So don't forget to stick around to the end of the show to see if your comment made the grade. Back to you, Angus.
Indeed, and James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And as usual, as James just mentioned, we will take a look at lazy comments at the end of the show, so do stay tuned for that. Right, James, what are you going to start us off with this morning?
Well, I already opened with the exciting hockey news because, hey, we are in Canada. But it is also Thanksgiving Day here in Canada, Thanksgiving Monday, and people are celebrating usually on the Sunday, but Monday being the holiday as well. Some people, depending on their schedules, will celebrate there. However, over the weekend, we know that the Sikh community does not really honor in their tradition Thanksgiving, but they do some who have basically taken on the celebrations here in Canada. But a lot of the Sikhs use it as an opportunity to be giving thanks to in other ways. And that is a part of the spirit of a shakrana. And that is giving back to people. That is honoring a whole tradition that they have of working and really giving back to the community and energy and continued success in life and many other ways. But in any event, the Community Foundation of the Nanak Food Bank, or the Guru Nanak Food Bank in Surrey spends a lot of time, including on these long weekends, putting together over 20,000 hampers that they put together per month to help all of the community. And it's not just the Sikh community. It is a group of 200 volunteers that are distributing, and I apologize, it's 18,000 grocery packages. So again, to 20,000 users. So it is amazing the work that's being done. And of course, as I said, I just wanted to touch on that because it is the true meaning of gratitude. And again, for us Canadians, it's giving thanks or Thanksgiving. And in the Sikh culture, it's called shakrana, and that is gratitude, which is more than just giving thanks. It is appreciating everybody and everything around them in the community and in the world. They combine that, of course, with seva, and that is giving back to the community. So they call that Van Chackle, which is gratitude in action. And again, they are really involved. So a big shout out to all of those people who are volunteering this weekend or today as a holiday to give back to the community at the Guru Nanak Food Bank. And just as a quick reminder, if anybody wants to learn more about them, they can find the article on our Substack. But also the gnfb.ca is the link to the Guru Nanak Food Bank, and you can make online contributions or make arrangements to go in and volunteer if you haven't been there. It is a massive, massive facility. They've got shelves like a warehouse set up. They've got forklifts cruising around. So it is a big operation that does amazing things in the community. Again, if you have the opportunity to support the Guru Nanak Food Bank or any other food bank in your community, of course, it's that time of year. As we've marked off now Thanksgiving on the calendar, the next big holiday will be Christmas. And we know that the food banks throughout the Lower Mainland, across the country and around the world, always appreciate your support at this time of year. As we move on, we are moving on to the United States and, of course, the ongoing court process in relation to the assassination plot. Now, this assassination plot, of course, we know the trial is coming up, and that was against Mr. Panoon. With this happening, of course, we also are looking at the connections because the prosecutors in New York have actually applied to have more information brought in the U.S. case. And the reason why is because they have more evidence and more information that is coming out in relation to the murder of Mr. Hardeep Singh Nijjar here in Surrey, British Columbia. Some of the evidence that they are looking to present in this case will include the video that the accused had on his phone and shared with his contact over in India just hours after the killing took place here in Surrey. He took ownership of that as being one of many upcoming contracts that they had on the lives of others throughout the US and here in Canada as well. So this is going to be one big case that starts November the 3rd, but whether or not that information is going to be brought in is another story. And the reason for that is because the accused lawyer is actually challenging and saying that it's not of any probative value, which means essentially that they are saying that it doesn't impact the case and the attempted assassination plot of Mr. Panoon. Now, as we look at this case, we also take a look at Vikash Yadav and information that the U.S. had made a backdoor deal with India to not follow through on the prosecution or the attempts to extradite him to the U.S. In exchange, now, of course, the India government agreed to remove him from any government post. Seems like a pretty easy deal for Mr. Yadav. He is not facing any type of prosecution in the U.S., although the warrant still stands for him by the FBI and the Justice Department. But again, they're not actually pursuing to have him brought back to the U.S. Now, with that deal struck, it is a blow to the whole process because I think that it is looking at devaluing the life of U.S. citizens from the U.S. diplomatic side. Instead, they're looking at trying to cozy up and try to continue making progress on trade issues and also to warm up India to more leniency when it comes to the U.S. and India sharing information against what they see as a mutual concern, and that, of course, being China. Now, with that said, there is more information coming out, again, that is bringing into light further involvement of potential higher-ups in the India government. How this plays into importance and significance is that we will not now be able to get the information from him to find out who above him in the chain of command was actually involved in this assassination plot against Mr. Panoon. So again, it has deep integrated concerns when you look at the sovereignty and the rule of law in the United States. Now, as we see this as well, of course, now that Donald Trump is, almost, 3/4 of a year into his second term, it also brings up concerns because if Donald Trump and his administration want to throw out the deal that Biden made with the India government when it comes to Mr. Yadav, then they have that priority or that prerogative, to do so. However, realistically looking at it, especially in light of current events, it would be very unlikely that Trump would want to utilize that in any way to bring him back to the U.S. for a trial and instead use that as a bargaining chip to negotiate some kind of pressure relief on the tariffs or giving the U.S. better trade deals and conditions or terms, and that could be the way it would work there. The reason why, though, would be the fact that the world and critics would be very quick to call out the United States hypocrisy in light of their bombing or their missile attacks on fishing vessels off the coast of Venezuela. Of course, we know that recently over an estimated 21 individuals have been killed in these attacks by the U.S. on alleged drug cartel boats. One of them actually has recently been identified as not Venezuelan and not on the list of concern for the United States when it comes to cartels. But again, it depends how or who you talk to in the US government to make that narrative. Those are the reports, but again, those are unconfirmed at this point. But regardless, there's three different scenarios that could play out. And that's scenario A, the transactional leverage play, of course, using it to leverage India into submitting to better terms for the US. The other scenario B would be the strongman affinity play, where Trump is really using it to cozy up to authoritarian leaders, but also to try and give a perception to other world leaders that he is playing hardball and that he is taking a harsh stand. And then, of course, the America First sovereignty plan, again, very similar to option B, but this one would be more to be punishing or appear to be punishing India. And again, with the same idea of of warning other nations that they are taking this seriously and they will come after them for anything that is perceived, not necessarily realistically, but anything that is perceived as a threat to the sovereignty of the United States. And neither of these three options really plays out in the favor of potential victims who are being targeted by RAW and other potential actors on behest of the India government. Again, it is a complicated process because, again, with the U.S. taking their new stance on these drug cartels, it is essentially a difference of one nation being accused of extrajudicial killings on open waters or transnational repression on open waters and international waters, as opposed to the India government and their operatives and agents working on Western foreign soil. So again, it does have some differentiation there, but again, the similarities could play into how that gets resolved. Now, as we continue on here, we will go back to, sorry, I've got my info out of order. There we go. And on that same subject, we are looking at another threat here in Canada. And of course, this is the RCMP warning. Again, to the head of basically Sikhs for Justice Canada, or at least one of the leaders there in the referendum movement. Now, Inderjit Singh Gosal, we know of his record in terms of him being picked up for various alleged charges or suspicions that have not been yet proven in court. However, he has been notified that he is still under immediate and credible threat of being his life ended in Canada. I got to be careful how I word it because otherwise our algorithms will bump us again, Angus. But in any event, the threat against him is credible, and they're saying that there are potentially hitmen or individuals who have been contracted here on the ground in Canada and in the Brampton area that have that contract that's been taken out on him. So again, a big concern, but he's standing firm. He says that he will be at the referendum vote coming up next month in Ottawa. He claims that he is not going to go into hiding. He is not going to allow them to push him underground. He is going to stand his own ground. He's going to protect himself and do everything that he has to do to protect his family or his friends. But at the same time, he is not going to hide from them because he doesn't want them to win in terms of the intimidation and the fear factor. And while I applaud his bravery, I also question, at what point do you say, okay, I've got to take some further action? And of course, we know that the police are not providing a great deal of support or protection for these individuals as they are being targeted. Now, of course, we also know that on October the 14th, the RCMP took a very serious step that was described as unprecedented in the way that they broke with standard protocol in not really speaking out about active investigations, but they did compel them to issue a significant threat to public safety in our country notice. And again, that was a bombshell because it really pushes the truth that there's allegations, or what I say is truth, but they're calling allegations of Indian state involvement in criminal activity from the realm of political declarations. And again, this is part of the official findings of Canada's premier law enforcement agency, and our historic agency that has done well by keeping up with not only their information, but that from foreign entities with CSIS, which is the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. So once again, the Minister of Public Safety, the RCMP, and CSIS are saying that there is a direct and credible threat on the ground here in Canada, and they are potentially acting at the behest of some high-up individuals in the India government. So again, if you want to read more about that, you're more than welcome to find that article as well. But in keeping up with our time here and trying not to go too far over tonight, we'll move on to the next story. And this one is a good news but bad news story all wrapped up in one. Let's start with the bad news, and that is a turban shop that has been opened in the Sudbury, Ontario area. Now, prior to that, most Sikhs had to go all the way to Brampton, which is quite a drive of several hours, in order to pick up, their turbans or other Sikh religious items. And of course, that is a big concern. While others had people that they knew, friends, family, and others, bringing it back from India when they made trips. So now they don't have to travel that huge distance. This young individual, or I guess, I call him young, but, aren't we all? Now, his name is Gurpreet Singh Broka, and he is a manager with one of the major banks in Canada. But he saw the need, and he saw that not only himself, but others in his community, his friends, his family, and people at his Gurdwara were all having the same issue, that they had to go all this distance just to pick up articles of Sikh faith and to get turbans and other items. So again, he said, why don't I start up a store here in Brampton? And the bad news comes in is that a lot of the Canada First crowd has been online, and they are using it as a call to their, how would you say, to their followers, to target them online, and stating that this is another issue of immigration, that it's another concern, that the immigration population has taken over the city. It's just a ridiculous, ridiculous argument. Now, most of these people are obviously uneducated on the Sikh contributions to Canadians, to Canada, and to our history, a very rich interwoven history at that. The Sikh community's been in Canada for over 100 years. These are people that came in the legal way. He has finished his schooling. He is working at the big banks. He is very involved in the community. He was one of the founders of the Sudbury Cricket Association, or the team, as well as giving back through things like the Rotary Club and other community organizations. So when they target him, they are targeting the specific people we want in our nation. Hardworking people with ethics and a real community-giving spirit, which is at the heart and soul of the Sikh community. More and more, as we've talked about, Angus, is that a lot of people are really crossing the line and blurring that line when it comes to legal and controlled immigration, as opposed to illegal immigrants coming in, or people exploiting the refugee programs or visa programs. And that is the sad reality that we're seeing. And it is creating that cultivation of division within Canadian society. And we know that we've seen American first mentalities. We've seen over in the UK where the same policies are really a concern of the community. And even in Japan, they're having a Japanese, or as they call it, Nippon, first mentality there and movement as well. So the Sikh community is being targeted at the behest of these groups that are more aggressive in terms of their outspokenness towards the immigration, towards immigrants, and towards citizens who may not look like them, but who have given generations of blood, sweat, and tears to make Canada the great nation that it is, Angus.
Yeah, I find, I mean, it's just when I heard the mention of Canada First, I'd not heard of Canada First, but it does, of course, reflect an organisation we have here in the UK called Britain First. And Britain First is a right-wing and primarily, not totally, but primarily right-wing extremist, racist. It is basically, I mean, let's call it what it is. It's a bunch of racists on the whole. But it's interesting. You see, our immigration situation here in the UK is a little bit more nuanced because, of course, we have a relatively speaking, and I'm going to be careful to say it, an indigenous population. Now, actually, in reality, the UK is made up of a huge variety of genes. Vikings, Saxons from Germany, but that's going back, 1,500 years or more. So our situation is a little bit more nuanced. But in North America, of course, whether it's the US or Canada, to have a Canada First, it clearly has to be racist because ultimately everybody in North America is a relatively recent immigrant, whether you're white, whether you're a Sikh, whatever. As you rightly said,
there's such an irony there.
Yeah, and this proves the fact that they are basically, it is purely down to the colour of the skin. It's nothing about Canada first. It's about white people first, and this is obviously clearly wrong because many of those Sikhs will be several generations in. As you said, they've been there for over 100 years. In fact, many of those Sikhs have been there a lot longer than many white people have been in Canada. So they are more Canadian than you are, many of them. So I find that whole sort of argument a little bit ironic, really. But anyway, that's a whole other issue. But what I would like to just jump back to is, of course, I think the really big story there, which is the Nijar and Vikram Yadav story, because well, first of all, it's very interesting that there is this potential deal going on. Firstly, or there was a potential deal going on. Firstly, when Nijar was murdered, India was accused by Justin Trudeau. I mean, it was very clear that Canada had the evidence behind the scenes that they weren't going to release at that stage to accuse the Indian government of being behind this murder. Again, that was a huge accusation. India, of course, immediately denied it, said, rubbish, how dare you accuse us? Created this huge diplomatic storm. Well, yet again, we have more evidence actually just quietly sort of slipping out that the Canadian authorities are now working, well, now they have been all the way through, but it's become more public that they are working with the US administration over the potential assassination of Hardeep Singh Gurpatwant Singh Panim. Therefore, both nations are linking the two. And that, by implication, means it's clearly got to be the Indian government. These weren't criminal killings. These were clearly political assassinations. And if, again, by implication, by logical deduction, they weren't done by criminal gangs because criminal gangs are more interested in just making money or killing or whatever. It has to be political, and therefore it comes from the Indian politics, therefore the Indian government. In other words, just through a sequence of logical deduction, North America has basically told the public, of course it's the Indian government. And there can be no doubt, otherwise we wouldn't be linking the two murders together. So again, that was one interesting thing that came out. Other interesting thing, of course, is Joe Biden and his approach to India. It was almost, again, it was a little bit of a Biden appeasement. I certainly was no fan of Biden's political approach. He did tend to sort of surrender at any given opportunity. It was a bit like Keir Starmer. He sort of follows that same sort of, I have to say, pretty useless effectiveness in terms of a leader. Yeah. So I think it's not surprising, let's say, that Biden was looking at doing a deal and just brushing it all under the carpet because he didn't want to fall out with big scary India. Starmer, again, I mean, the parallels are really quite interesting. But along comes Donald Trump, and suddenly the whole scenario changes. And as we said, well, I mean, like him or loathe him, Donald Trump is an ego. He is a force of nature. He is a leader in the true sense of the word. Good or bad, it doesn't matter. But he is a leader. Nobody can deny that. And I think, as you rightly said, James, that there are three possible scenarios, but the likely one is this sort of hybrid. And this is very much, I think, what I've been predicting all along, is that, of course, North America and the West, Five Eyes nations, know India was behind that assassination. There is no doubt. I personally have no doubt that they have no doubt that it was India, the Indian government endorsed these murders of these Khalistanis. But they are using this, and they will use this as leverage. They will use this as political capital, as political leverage against India, as we've always said, to get them more on side, more aligned with the West. Now, I have to say, I'm increasingly thinking, well, okay, this is the inevitable outcome, but is it really worth it? It always comes back down to, and again, I think it was implied in your report there, James. It's politics versus law. Who prevails? Ultimately, we all in democratic nations, we are ruled by the rule of law. Rule of law trumps everything. It trumps politics. It trumps everything. Whether you're a king, a queen, or a lowly peasant, the law treats everybody equally and is the ultimate arbiter. That's it. You cannot defy the law. In theory. In practice, politics. Politics influences the law, sadly, to a huge extent in India, as we've seen, where India has weaponized the law so that the law has been abused and twisted and manipulated to become a political tool. Now, in the West, slightly less so, but it still happens. And it is likely that the law will be trumped by politics. Excuse the pun there, but the law will be trumped by politics, where there will be some leaning by the politicians, the US administration, onto the law enforcers, the FBI, the CIA, etc., to say, actually, it's more expedient, politically speaking, for our geopolitical relations with India, that you just quietly bury this under the carpet. But in turn, the politicians will then go to India and say, right, we've pushed the lawmakers aside. We'll let your man off, and we won't even pursue this trail of evidence all the way up to Mr. Modi himself. But we want something in return. Now, great. Again, it's maybe that's the way it has to go. But ultimately, is there a level of naivety here? Do we honestly think that India is going to come alongside? India has shown itself very unambiguously to be not just aligned with Russia, but now increasingly aligned with the likes of China, North Korea, Iran, Belarus, these authoritarian regimes. So are we wasting this political capital? Are we wasting our efforts thinking we can seduce India? Or ultimately, are we just looking a bit of a fool and India's just laughing and saying, yeah, give us, but actually we're in bed with with the other team. So again, you almost feel we're sort of reaching a bit of a geopolitical head here, where India is actually just going to be forced to take side. We are still giving them the benefit of the doubt. We're still trying the carrot and stick approach, but ultimately our politicians are going to have to come to a point and say, look, is India an ally or not? It's very clear to us that it's not. It is certainly not a reliable ally. It picks and chooses what suits its own interest best. That doesn't make it an ally. It just makes it a temporary ally, an ally on certain issues. And again, this always comes back to Khalistan. This is why we need Khalistan, because India is not to be trusted. We have thrown everything at India on the table. Here you go. We've given them all sorts of incentives to come alongside, and they've just cherry-picked what they want, and they're still meeting with Xi Jinping. They're still in bed with Vladimir Putin. They're still funding the Ukraine war. They're still buying Russian oil, etc. So I think we're being taken for a bit of a ride here in the West, James. And I think the only solution, as I keep saying, it has to be the establishment of Khalistan so that we do have a powerful ally in that region.
Absolutely. And that is something that we've talked about at great lengths here on the show, because of the fact that we know that Modi and his government is going to go with whatever gets them the most benefit. Again, of course, as leaders, you want to be representative of your nation. But at the same time, they are representing their personal and professional goals in terms of business, money, monetary, all of that, over their own citizens. And let's not forget that. It's a difference when you are trying to get a benefit for your citizens and your nation's betterment, but that is not the case here, Angus.
Indeed, and it's interesting that it even cascades down to, from the politicians, and Canada actually is an exception. Canada's politicians have been really quite vocal against India, and full credit to them until Carney came along, and maybe again so the criticism now applies to Carney. But it's interesting; it's cascaded down to even the RCMP now, making these statements saying, "Look, we have a genuine threat on our streets, that our citizens here in Canada are genuinely under threat from another nation, from the political assassins of another nation." It's huge to make these sorts of statements. I mean, if the Metropolitan Police here in the UK said that, it would be front page news. It'd be a huge story. Ultimately, our Met Police do know it is the case, but they don't have the guts to come out with it openly, and certainly the politicians wouldn't allow them. Starmer's government certainly wouldn't allow them. And again, I think it's full credit to Canada once again for being at that vanguard of calling it out, James.
Absolutely. And just to quickly touch on the previous story there, Angus, about the turban store, I just wanted to give the name of the store so our guests or our viewers and our fans here can maybe just pop in if they're interested. It's called the Charticala Turban Store. And again, it's in Sudbury, Ontario. So if you're in that area and you do happen to go in, tell them that the guys over at Perspective say hello.
Excellent. A great name. Charticala Turban Store. I love it. Absolutely. Charticala to everybody. Indeed. Okay, well, let's move on to my story now. And over in Geneva, it's just come to a close. There's been the month-long running annual sort of get-together of the United Nations Human Rights Council. Now, they meet every year to review the status of human rights around the world, but obviously they do focus on those countries that crop up quite regularly. And of course, we know which country does crop up on quite a regular basis. Of course, I'm referring to India. Now, as a result of that, as part of this commission, as indeed in recent years, the Sikh community have been very present at these meetings, and they have actually provided a huge amount of evidence and advocacy on part of the Sikh community globally, the Sikh diaspora, to present to the United Nations and tell them what actually has been going on the ground for the Sikh community in the diaspora, and as a result of this sort of these operations, these TNR operations coming out of India. And at the front of this, it's the Sikh Federation. It's the Sikh Federation International who again have been one of the leading organisations at the UN. And as it came to a close on the 8th of October, so just a few days ago. And now present at that commission was Prabjot Singh and Maninder Singh, who are again both Canadians, and they represent the Sikh Federation International. I'm going to play you a video of some of the meetings that went on and some of the things that were said. It's quite interesting things that have came out. I mean, most of it, unsurprisingly, actually, if you're a regular watcher of the show. But they provided a huge report. And they actually presented a detailed report to the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture. Now, we do know earlier this year that the UN rapporteurs released a report about transnational oppression that specifically was very condemning against India. I mean, it really left no stone unturned. It's quite damning against India. So we already know the UN Human Rights Council did actually produce a report already. Anyway, they presented more details to the special rapporteurs on torture, documenting this widespread and, of course, this effectively what is institutionalised use of torture in India, and particularly focusing on Punjab. And they raised all sorts of issues, but specifically they raised, of course, the arbitrary detention of Jagtar Singh Johal and the persecution of khalistan, the campaigners around the diaspora, and, of course, even within India specifically as well. And interestingly, also at the commission, it's reported they came out to say that over this month that they spent in Geneva, they built huge global, really important alliances with other global human rights defenders and liberation movements, including groups from Palestine, Scotland. It's interesting that they're from Scotland, Tamil, Elam, and other nations. So again, it was this really important networking event. It's really significant that all these human rights organisations do network, join forces, because of course individually they're all quite small. They're up against these Leviathan governments, these hugely powerful governments like India, and of course China and Russia. And I think even just lumping India in the same sentence as China and Russia gives you a clue of just how concerned the world is about India, that it's even been discussed in the same breath as the likes of Russia and China. I mean, again, Modi should be ashamed of himself that his nation is being discussed in that same sentence as Russia and China. But anyway, so I'm just going to play you. I'll just quickly play you this video so you can see a few things that were said, and there's particularly one area that I find very significant that I'm just going to play you now.
In the case of the Sikh community, asserting a right to self-determination and restoring an independent Sikh homeland, khalistan, after a deceitful British annexation in 1849 and ongoing Indian occupation since 1947. It's meant widespread human rights violations, enforced disappearances, torture, arbitrary detention, to the assassination of political activists that are living in exile. Such as the case of Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Canada, who was assassinated in 2023, and the attempted assassination of Sikh lawyer Gupta Singh Pannu in the United States in the same year. I'd like to actually just ask a question that is particularly focused on these commonality of these struggles. I just want to note the case of Jagtar Singh Johal, who's a Scottish national born and raised in Dumbarton. He's been arbitrarily detained, tortured in India for the last 8 years, and the British government has made no meaningful kind of like attempts to actually have him released. And all for the sake of him fighting for human rights, Sikh sovereignty, and self-determination. So in the context of this, maybe my question is for Mr. Murray, but any of the panelists, is how can people striving for self-determination work together and support each other's movements effectively in the face of such horrific torture, detention on behalf of states that are trying to quash their legitimate dissent? And inside and outside of the UN structure, which has its mechanisms, but it also has its limitations, how are people able to continue on this path and support each other in their sovereignty and self-determination struggles, and see their struggles as a larger movement for decolonization globally and ending occupation over lands and people?
I'd start by saying I am aware of the individual case you mentioned, and there are people in Scotland who are aware and who are campaigning on that subject. And unfortunately, the British government really very little prioritises consular assistance to people who fall foul of governments with which the British government wishes to maintain friendly relations. There have been appalling cases of British citizens detained, often tortured, by states across the globe, where the British government has done nothing whatsoever to try to help them. And very often it's because those people come from a people or an ethnic minority which the British government doesn't typically. The British annexation of the Sikh lands in the 1840s was a dreadful act of bad faith. And to this day, the main jewel in the British crown was stolen from the Sikhs. One of the many crimes of empire, the young emperor of the Sikhs at that time was kidnapped as a small child and taken and held for the rest of his life, effectively prisoner in the United Kingdom. So I'm deeply aware of the history, and it always amazes me how many conflicts in the world go back. When there was recent instability in Kenya, the roots of that went back to dispossession of one group of
etc., etc. So that was Craig Murray. He's a former British ambassador, and the last part of his sort of answer to Mininder Singh's question was more about the British Empire. There's a bit of self-flagellation, as we call it, saying how evil the British Empire was. Well, I don't agree with that. It was a different time. It was an empire. We've all had it. Well, so most countries have had empires. So I think it's irrelevant. What's done is basically what I'm saying. So let's not dwell on that. Yeah, the British did some bad things, but ultimately, and this comes back to what I've often said, is that, yeah, we acknowledge what we did as an empire, but certainly in terms of reparations, what we should be doing is advocating and campaigning to give back what we took from the Sikh community, which is, of course, their own homeland, which is, of course, Khalistan. But anyway, that's another issue. Now, but the bit I really wanted to highlight was actually, this is quite a bombshell statement, actually, that hasn't really been picked up, I think, enough, is that, I'll quote his words here: the British government, and don't forget, this is a former British ambassador, so he knows these things. The British government prioritises very little consular assistance to people who fall foul of governments with which the British government wishes to maintain friendly relations. They've been appalling cases of British citizens detained, often tortured, by states across the globe where the British government has done nothing whatsoever to try to help them. Very often it's because most people come from ethnic minorities which the British government doesn't particularly value. Now, again, I mean, no surprise if you're a regular watcher of this show, I've been saying this for a very long time. Clearly, the British government, firstly, doesn't give two hoots about its British Sikh community. And certainly, when it comes to Jagtar Singh Johal, has done, in his words, absolutely nothing. It doesn't care because it's more interested in building relations. Now, again, there is a real politic argument here, is that, yes, of course, a government has to look after the best interests of its nation, which interests are more important, that the overall interests of the nation or the interests of either an individual or a small minority. So you could argue that there's a real politic element to this. But ultimately, we are a democratic nation that is supposedly standing up for human rights. Now, you cannot be hypocritical enough that you then brush the fundamental foundations of our democracy under the carpet for the sake of appeasing a foreign nation that actually, arguably, has also been assassinating British citizens on British soil. Of course, I'm referring to Jagtar Singh Kandar here. So again, I think it's again, you use that word in your report, James, bombshell. This is a bombshell. I think that a British ambassador has admitted, and I hope the Sikh community pick up on this more widely and more publicly, is that a British ambassador, former ambassador, has admitted the British government doesn't care and has done absolutely nothing. Firstly, to protect the British Sikh community as a whole, but secondly, to protect a British citizen, Jagtar Singh Johal, because he comes from the Sikh community. Again, James, I'm absolutely quite taken aback when I heard him admit these things. And again, he was a typical diplomat. He did, again, when talking about the British Empire, it obviously did show I would say an interesting history. He does know his history. I would actually dispute some of the things that he did say. I mean, he did talk about Dulip Singh, which of course, Queen Victoria did bring back to the UK to prevent him from engendering the Sikh community to rise up again against the British. But anyway, I don't want to get into that. That's a whole different discussion. But there you go, James. As I said, I think what he did admit, I think, is in itself a bit of a bombshell, but an unsurprising bombshell. We knew what was going on.
Absolutely. And I mean, at the end of the day, we didn't expect anything to come out in terms of revelations about any status of Jaggy. We know that things are not moving in the right direction in terms of the pressure, politics or otherwise, backdoor channels, anything. We're not hearing any noise coming out of that region. Once again, you look at it from a point that if a nation is going to stand up for their citizens, if they are going to put other nations on notice for human rights, then they have to back the play of their words. And I say that because of the simple fact that if the governments get known by these others that they're not playing around when it comes to the rights of their own citizens, if they have a reputation of standing firm and standing harsh against the other nations for the arbitrary detention or the torture of their citizens, then of course you're going to see less of it because they know that the British right now, the way it is going to roll over and let them have them. And that is not a way to govern, in my opinion. And I think that they have to take a firm stand. And again, that would put the other governments on notice that they're not going to stand back and let it happen.
Indeed, and Maninder Singh obviously was very active during that month, during the sessions there. And I'm just going to play. The Sikh Federation International did release another video that contained Maninder's speech. Let me play this as well. This sums up a lot of what was said and what it was all
Vice
about.
President, the Vienna Declaration is seen as an important document for the protection of human rights, which includes the protection of vulnerable groups and minorities. On September 20th, 2023, the former Special Rapporteur on Minority Issues, Ferdinand Barans, warned, and I quote, India risks becoming one of the world's main generators of instability, atrocities, and violence due to the systematic targeting of minorities, Muslims, Christians, and Sikhs, and others under the banner of religious nationalism, end quote. Along similar lines, multiple mandate holders of this council issued a joint communication to India in November 2024 regarding extrajudicial killings and violent attacks on Sikh activists in exile. They stress that such attacks contribute directly to an increasingly, quote, hostile environment in Punjab, end quote. Canada's Deputy Foreign Minister of Foreign Affairs, David Morrison, testified before a parliamentary committee in Canada in October of 2024 that India's Home Affairs Minister, Amit Shah, is the architect of these transnational attacks. The Sikh people continue to face arbitrary detention, torture, extrajudicial killings at the hands of Indian state authorities. Those who advocate for an independent Sikh homeland, Khalistan, are treated not as political actors exercising fundamental rights, but as enemies of the state to be silenced. This campaign of repression has extended beyond India's borders, creating a risk for the Sikh community worldwide and escalating tensions that may create further conflict.
Now, this is significant because it's very clever. This is very clever what the Sikh Federation International are up to because Not least, so just on, if you take it at face value, they are just complaining to the United Nations that we are a persecuted minority in India. But it's very clever what they're doing, because, of course, the United Nations is going to be one of the key bodies that decides whether Khalistan is established or not. It is going to decide and is going to influence any international courts when these things go to the courts to be decided legally. Is that India's defence against the establishment of Khalistan, India's argument, legal argument, will always be that it is a threat to the integrity of our country, of the country of India. That is a genuine legal defence. India can legally argue that we cannot allow Khalistan because it is a threat to our geographical integrity, to our boundaries as they stand at the moment, which is that is an acceptable legal argument. However, there is one condition that undermines, that removes that argument, and that is if the people in that nation, if they are treated with less human rights than the rest of the nation. In other words, if they are abused, their human rights are restricted, etc. And that is exactly what's going on here. All these campaigns, the likes of Meninda out there presenting all these reports, these detailed reports, all they're doing beautifully and very subtly, but very clearly and unambiguously, is laying out all the evidence in advance. So they're moving that whole perception of the United Nations. So everybody who's there, their perception over time is growing increasingly that India really is abusing these Khalistanis. It is abusing the Sikhs in the Punjab. In other words, it's actually embedding, almost subliminally, it's embedding this assumption that becomes acceptable, that becomes accepted by everybody. Yeah, clearly India is persecuting the Sikhs in the Punjab. So that there immediately is creating the bedrock foundation of that legal argument. So when it does come to the legal case, is that when India states, oh, it's a threat to our integrity, it's a threat to our geographical boundaries, then people can stand up, well, look, we've been telling you for years, this is not the case. We've presented for years this evidence that we are treated as second-class citizens. We have our human rights abused. You are not treating us as equals in India. You are actually abusing us. So again, you can see the very, very clever methodology behind the scenes going on here. As I say, face value, but underneath there is a very shrewd, intelligent agenda behind all this. So well done to the Sikh community for doing this. I think, again, it's moving towards inevitability that Khalistan is going to win the legal argument, not just a simple democratic argument. It's going to win the legal argument as well. So anyway, James, I'm just going to wrap up as time marches on, just one final video. And I reported at the end of last week, Keir Starmer was in Mumbai meeting Narendra Modi. And of course, there's a lot of pressure behind the scenes, firstly, about the whole human rights issues, but secondly, of course, about Jagtar Singh Johal. Now, the big question has been, has Keir Starmer raised the question of Jagtar Singh Johal with Narendra Modi? Has he demanded, Modi, why are you imprisoning one of our citizens against any normal rule of law? Well, he was actually asked this question in a press conference in Mumbai. Let me play you the question and his answer.
Separately, did you raise the issue of British man Jagtar Singh Johal? What did you ask and what was the response?
On the consular cases, yes, we did raise the consular cases. We always raise them when we have the opportunity to do so. I should say that the Foreign Secretary is meeting the families in coming weeks, as well as raising it today. Thank you.
And that was it. That literally was his only mention of Jagtar Singh Johal, and notice it didn't even mention his name. Consular issues. He just referred to consular issues. He couldn't even bring himself to actually mention Jackie's name, and then it's just washed. Again, slopey shoulders. He's just given it to the Foreign Secretary. Oh, it's the Foreign Secretary will deal with it. But again, in other words, I'm not even sure. I actually genuinely wonder if he even knows about the case, or even knows what he was referring to. You know, he is that incompetent and stupid, frankly. I honestly think that he didn't even know what the story of Jagtar Singh Johal was. So again, if anybody's surprised by this, wake up. Keir Starmer is just true to form. He's just following exactly how he has been following this Jagtar Singh Johal case. He just doesn't care. He really doesn't care. His eyes are only on trade deals, etc. Human rights. The irony is he is a human rights lawyer, but human rights don't even enter the equation here, James. Again, I'm almost laughing in just horror at Keir Starmer.
And you know me, Angus, I'm kind of a half glass or glass half full kind of guy, and I'm hoping that the lack of statement by him means that there are some conversations going on that he doesn't want to bring into the public realm. We know that that is more the behest of the India government not wanting these types of issues to be negotiated in the public. But I'm also a realist. I look at the history and the track record and say, do you know what? I'm sure he knows who Jaggi is because the Sikh community has not been quiet. They have been very loud and they've been very persistent to make sure that this message is not lost, that Jaggi is not forgotten. But I also think that in the realistic outlook, that he just doesn't give a crap.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I totally mirror exactly what you just said there. So under normal circumstances, I would believe that they're not saying anything because there's an awful lot going on beneath the surface that they don't want to jeopardise by making any misstatements publicly. But this is Keir Starmer we're talking about, and the Labour government, who, and again, judged by results, the results speak for themselves. Jagtar remains in prison. They've done absolutely nothing for the Sikh community. All the promises that they made, including the 1984 inquiry, where's that? They promised that in their manifesto before they're even elected. Here we are over a year in. Not even mentioned it. Again, it's just betrayal after betrayal after betrayal. So unfortunately, we just have to assume that Starmer's government has absolutely no interest in its British Sikh community that actually helped elect it in place. Anyway, James, let's move on now because I could rant for hours about that one. Let's move on to our comments column. And loads of great comments came in at the end of last week. So thank you to our wonderful audience for your comments. And the first one I want to pick up. This is Bob Singh's a great comment. Really, it's just a message, and it reflects a message that came out with Dr. Greywell's discussion I did, it was about 2 weeks ago, the podcast. And his message was exactly this. Enough is enough to the Sikh community. No more genocides. We've been attacked through our books, our culture, water, the floods, the dams, religion's been attacked. There's no justice. The Sikhs have been divided deliberately, etc., much, much more. And then again, you talk about the numbers contained within these genocides. And I think the message there, James, is enough is enough. Sikhs absolutely need to wake up. And this, again, was Dr. Greywell's message. The Sikh community, particularly in the Punjab, needs to wake up, get off your feet. We need to campaign. We need to be more active. We need to rise up against this persecution and do something about it.
Absolutely. And it takes a very large vocal community to make change. And it starts with one person. And that can be the one person that's sitting at home on the couch to get up and to be a leader and bring more people on board. And together things can get changed. Indeed.
And Baz makes a comment about India. We did ask a question about India picking a side in that show. And Baz responds saying, look, it's already picked its side. Well, I think I've already even mentioned it in today's show. Is basically they're clearly siding with Russia. They've always sided with Russia. But what you're saying is the West needs to wake up to this fact. Totally agree, absolutely. And but then you do bring in the point that we actually raised as well, is that if we can recognise Gaza, I mean, Starmer recognised Palestine, the state of Palestine, as indeed has Carney, as indeed has Macron, as indeed has Albanese in Australia. All these, the World Economic Forum proxies, they've all recognised Palestine. So why on earth can't you recognise Khalistan, James? Yeah, absolutely. If you recognise that, Khalistan actually has a greater democratic mandate than Palestine does.
Absolutely. I mean, let's face it. I would much rather see it recognized as Palestine than Mar-a-Lago of the Middle East.
Exactly. Well, let's not go down that road. Jasvinder Singh says, India's been distributing weapons and drugs internationally. We do know this, yeah. India must disappear from this world map. Well, I think basically what you mean there is that we need the Balkanization. We need the breakup of India, because India as a whole, under this BJP government, under this Hindutva-controlled government, it is a danger to the global world order, James.
Absolutely. And in that article that I referred to earlier, there's actually a section in there about how India was offering to bring in plane loads of guns and circumvent U.S. customs, immigration, and other controls in order to hand them off to these gangs and these proxy actors on behalf of the India government that were involved in these assassination attempts and plans and such. So again, hitting the nail right on the head there.
Yeah, and just a comment on the thumbnail. Really interesting. I noticed our last 2 or 3 shows when Starmer was in India. our views were massively down. I mean, talking about being shadow banned or throttled, whatever. So I actually changed the thumbnail just to try and make it a bit more quirky. Apologies for the sort of the rather egotistical image of me sticking with Modi. But I just did that just to try and change the algorithm or something. Because weirdly, our numbers were really down. If ever we had any doubt that our shows are being throttled, last week really proved it, because our numbers were down probably 50, 60, 70%, which, again, quite concerning. Anyway, that explains the weird thumbnail. But Stay Safe, talking about Starmer, actually, Stay Safe makes a comment. We talked about India taking a permanent seat on the UN Security Council, its attempts to do that. Well, you say that Starmer agreed that India should be a member. He held separate talks with Nandan Nilekani. He's a co-founder and chair of Infosys, this huge Indian tech company, which Starmer wanted to gain ideas from India. Talking about the ID cards. Now, this is a huge story here in the UK, is that Starmer, suddenly out of the blue, a few weeks ago, announced we're going to bring in digital IDs. This is a huge thing. It flies in the face of any sort of freedom, democracy, whatever. Basically, it's a Tony Blair agenda. Blair has been pushing these. And this is an agenda to try and... It's basically following the Chinese social credit system, where each of us just become numbers in a huge system. And the government knows everything about everything that we do, about the money we spend, the places we go, the shops we visit, any websites we go to. Basically, they know everything about us. And if they don't like it, they can switch us off. They can deny us access to our own money. It's a deeply, deeply dangerous thing. This is ultimate authoritarianism. This is communism. This is, it's something that everybody in the West must actively resist to your very final breath. Resist digital IDs, because once they have that, you will never, ever be able to say no to the government again in the future. You will lose every freedom that you enjoy at this moment. This is a march towards ultimate authoritarianism. This is literally a march towards a dangerous dystopian future. We must resist. This is the hill that we all must die on. I cannot plead to every member of our audience, whichever nation you're in, resist this drive. This is their agenda, to control our entire lives, every element. You think you've got it bad as a Khalistani campaigning against Narendra Modi. You wait here in the West, where you take your freedoms for granted. You try and take some money out of the bank after you've posted on Facebook something that you didn't like the government, something you didn't like that the government had done. They will stop you accessing your money, or say, you're only allowed a certain amount of money because you criticise the government. That's where this is going. Do not let them get this power. Please, I beg you. You must resist digital IDs. Thank you, Stay Safe, for raising this. And you're saying it's already in place in India. Well, surprise, surprise, authoritarian India. Don't let it roll out here in the West, James.
Absolutely. And again, thanks to Stay Safe, because Stay Safe is very active in our comment section all the time, both here and on Substack. So it's great to have our viewers so involved in the program. And we encourage others to do the same. Just really get involved. Have the conversations with us, because we enjoy them. And this raises very, very important points. And when you are giving up certain freedoms, they don't take them all at once. They just slowly warm up and warm up and warm up until you one day turn around and go, where the heck did all of my freedom go? I gave it up one piece at a time and allowed it. And now it's all gone without me even realizing it.
Exactly that. And Starmer said he's brought it in to prevent illegal immigration. It's absolute nonsense. But then a few weeks later said, okay, well, it's also if you want to pay your bills to the government, or you pay your council tax. Suddenly you can see that it's the incremental steps. The digital ID was originally brought, or it wants to bring it in to stop illegal immigration. But suddenly, within a few years, you'll find literally it controls every part of your life. Please, please, please do not let them do this. We must literally take to the streets to whatever extent to prevent them bringing this in. So anyway, let's move on. But please do heed the warning there. TC, oh yeah, this is interesting. This really follows up the same sort of argument. Leaders that need to affirm their positions using trade may as well sell the country to the highest bidder. Yes, Starmer is being accused basically of capitulating to anybody who comes, and actually even our political jokers in the newspapers when they write the cartoons, they're now mocking Starmer, saying that all the international leaders are all lining up to come and negotiate with Starmer because he just gives in, he surrenders. Starmer capitulates every time he comes up to another leader to negotiate something, and unfortunately that is what's happening. Getting into bed with hostile countries. Yeah, China is now buying up all our infrastructure here in the West, certainly here in the UK, and again, Starmer's government is just saying, yeah, bring it on, buy up what you want. Worrying times ahead, weak leadership needs changing. Can anyone imagine President Trump being manipulated in this way? We need a complete upgrade. We need an overhaul in politics that puts its people's interests, sovereignty and their safety first. Absolutely, TC. I could not agree with your comment more, James.
Absolutely, I agree with almost everything there, except for, I'm not a Trump fan, so, you just offer him a 747 and you get what you want, including a new military base on U.S. soil. So I'm going to leave that one alone, Angus.
Let's swiftly move on to our final set of comments. Ujaga Singh says, hello, everybody. Well, hello to you. And thank you for your comment. Again, just a general shout out to all our wonderful audience who just put in the sort of the good mornings, hellos and Waheguru G's and what have you in there. And khalistan's in the of course. So, and hello back to you, and thank you for that comment. Avatar Dylan says, nice one, Angus and James. Brilliant journalism once again. I wouldn't call it brilliant, but we do our best. The Guru will appreciate our work. Truth stands before anything else. Take care. Have a good day. Well, the same to you guys, and thank you for your comments. Yeah, we're all about the truth. Well, the truth always prevails, James. That's the key phrase.
Absolutely. And, it's tough sometimes when we get, as Angus was touching on earlier, we get shadow banned, we get blocked geographically. And it's important that we keep reporting the truth, but it's just as important that you keep encouraging it, because the more you put comments on there, even if, as Angus said, it's just a good morning or a hello or whatever, it does help in the algorithm. So it helps us to battle back to get in front of more people. So again, just those little things can help us.
Indeed. And the last three comments, some lovely comments. Thank you for these. Sukhpal says, friends remain friends. Thanks for your true journalism. So that's a lovely touching comment. Thank you for that. And Bobby Singh says, many thanks for spreading the voice of the Sikh community. That is what we're here for. That is what we take great pride and pleasure in doing so. And of course, my Punjabi is almost fluent now. Look at this, because that says Khalistan Zindabad, James.
There we go, Angus. You're impressing even me.
Of course, thank you to Google Translate as always for that. But there, indeed, we must draw things to a close for another day. Thanks so much for watching. Do keep your comments coming in. Thanks for all your lovely comments that have been coming in. And don't forget you can message us directly at message@satlugetv.com. So anything you'd like to bring to our attention directly, as many of you have been doing. So thank you for that. Do let us know some stories that we might have missed or things that you'd like us to talk about. But that's it for another day. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.